All right, all you math geniuses, we are going to look at two-step equations with fractions, okay? So we're going to use that I hate fractions approach when encountering these. We're going to look at this question. We're going to say, okay, I see half times x plus 1/10 equals 3/5. I see two or more fractions, and I think to myself, I hate fractions, and I want to get rid of them. Okay, and in order to do so, I'm going to try to find a common denominator by determining the least common multiple. So just by looking at these, I think I can determine that the least common multiple would be 10, so my common denominator could be 10. If I can't see it automatically, one approach I could try is doing taking the two smallest numbers, 2 times 5, which is 10, and seeing if the third denominator also works with that. It's 10, so in this case it works. If I still don't like those approaches, I could take each of my denominators, 2, 5, and 10, and I could do multiples of each number until I have a common multiple. So I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, okay, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So I would just 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. I'd make a few multiples, and then I would look for the lowest multiple they have in common, the least common multiple. In this case, it's 10. Okay? So that's a few ways to get your lowest common denominator. We want to get these to all be 10. So what am I going to do? I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom of these guys by 5. So 2 times 5 is 10. 1 times 5 is 5. Okay? Here, it already is 1/10, so I'm just going to multiply them both by 1, I guess, technically. And here, remember, I'm lining up all my equal signs, my values, and my addition sign here very well. Here, I'm going to multiply both by 2 to get 6/10. Okay? Now I'm having a common denominator here. My goal is to get everything out of the same amount of pieces, so I can eliminate the denominator, and I'm left with 5x plus 1 equals 6. And in this case, we now have a super simple, straightforward equation to solve. I always deal with the variable term last, so I'm going to add or subtract. I see plus 1, I'm going to subtract 1 away from both sides. And now I see 5 times x equals 5. Well, I don't want to know what 5x's values are. I want to know what 1x's value is. So I'm going to do the opposite of multiplying. I'm going to divide. 5 divided by 5 leaves me with 1x. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. And in this case, I can simplify this to a whole number. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So my answer is x equals 1. Okay? We look at the next example, and you might want to try it out on your own right away and then check in with me after. In this case, there's a whole number, so that's a little different. Here we had 3 fractions right off the bat. Here we have 2 fractions and a whole number. Now we can still use our I hate fractions approach. I see fractions, I start to get angry, I think I hate fractions, I want to get rid of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2x over 1. So it looks like a fraction as well. And now I can find the lowest common denominator. Since this is 1, any number works for that. So I'm just going to go 3 times 4 is 12. I'm going to use 12 as my least common denominator. So to get this guy to be 12 as a denominator, I'd have to go times it by 12, times it by 12, okay? 24x over 12. This guy is going to be times it by 3, times it by 3. 9, 12. So I made an extra line there, but that's okay. And here, well, we got to get this guy to be 12, so times it by 4, times it by 4, 8, 12s. Do we have a common denominator? Yes, we do. Clear it out. We have ourselves 24x plus 9 equals 8. And now it's very simple. I can start to get rid of the constant. It says plus 9, so I'm going to take it away from one side. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other, and I'm left with 8 minus 9 is negative 1. And now I have 24 times x equals negative 1. I'm going to undo the multiplication by doing the opposite to both sides. So divide away, and since it's a fraction, I will leave my answer as a fraction, negative 1/24. Okay. Now, some of you might notice, using this approach, I really don't need this step where I write down the denominator. So if it makes sense to me, and I'm rocking it with this approach, do it exactly like we did here. If you're someone that's starting to say, hey, I understand that every time I do this, I'm going to end up at this step anyways, so I don't need to write down that denominator of 12, really, that is also a good approach, and you can start to do it that way as well. Okay? And if you have more questions on that, you can ask me in class about that part. Now, you might want to do a check. I want to make sure I have the right answer. So let's check this one. I'm going to take my question here, my equation, and I'm going to do a verification. Okay, I'm going to give myself some space here. I'm going to verify that I have the right answer. So I'm going to have 2, and I'm going to substitute in negative 1/24 for x, because my thought is that x equals negative 1/24, and I want to prove it. And then the rest of my equation, as you guys know, we write in exactly how it looks. So I look at this, I have to multiply. I could just do 2 times negative 1, and then it would still be 24ths. Or if it helps me to see it, I could put 2 over 1 and think, okay, 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. 1 times 24 is 24. Okay? Now, if I was you, I would probably pre-simplify the 2 and the 24. But for now, we'll show it at this rate. Okay? Now I look at these, I want to get a common denominator, because I have to get common denominators to add. So I'm thinking, okay, I could meet at 12, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to get these guys to both be 24. Okay, so we have negative 2/24 plus 18/24 equals 2/3. I have the same denominator, so it's going to be out of 24 pieces. I have 18 plus negative 2. Well, that's the same as 18 minus 2, so I'm at 16/24 equals 2/3 still. There's consistency on this side. Last step is I got to prove it's the exact same value, so I'm going to simplify. These are both multiples of 8. So I'll divide them both by 8. And I've proven 2/3 equals 2/3. Okay, so I do have the right answer. We know that for sure. Let's do one last example. And this one is a complicated one to check. If you have any questions on the verification on this one, you need some help, come and ask me in the class, okay? But for the time being, we're just going to solve to make sure you have a good understanding of solving. So I have to adjust my camera. Okay, here we go. One last example for today. Having a bit of technical difficulties here on the Mr. Critchlow YouTube channel. There we go. We have m divided by 6 minus half equals negative 1 3/4. Now it looks like this camera just doesn't want to work with me for a second. Let's see if we can fix it up. There we go. We want to get a common denominator. You're right, but before I hate those fractions, I don't like to work with mixed numbers, so I'm going to convert negative 1 3/4. I'm going to go one group of 4 is 4, and 3 more is 7/4, and we know that it's a negative value, okay? And we have m divided by 6 minus half. So I look at these, I think, what is my common denominator? I could use that approach we talked about earlier, write down my 3 denominators, 2, 4, and 6, and do multiples. I could do some multiples and keep going. Eventually, you're going to notice, hey, there's the lowest number I have in common for all of them as multiples, and that's my denominator. Or you might just look at it and say, oh, that's 12. I know that. Either way is good, okay? So here, to get this to be a common denominator of 12, I have to multiply the top by 2, bottom by 2. 2 times 6 is 12. Remember from polynomials unit, 2 times m, since we don't know the value of m, we just have to leave it as 2m. Okay? Now we have half. Well, to get that to be twelfths, going to multiply the top and the bottom by 6. 6 twelfths, okay? And lastly, we've got negative 7 fourths. Well, 4 times 3 is 12, so let's multiply those both by 3. Okay? Common denominator, sayonara mi amigo, we're left with 2m minus 6 equals negative 21. Okay? And at this point, it's now an easy two-step equation. We've simplified the process for ourselves. We're just going to add 6 to both sides. 2m equals, well, hey, negative 21 plus 6, we know different signs subtract. 21 minus 6 is 15. And we know there's more negatives than positives, so it's negative 15. Okay? And we look here, 2 times m equals negative 15. Well, we want just one m, so we're going to divide away the 2. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. And we are left with our answer, negative 15 halves in simplest terms. It is also acceptable to answer this as a mixed number, so negative 7 and 1/2. Okay, hopefully this gets you started. There are 6 practice questions on the sheet, so you can work on those as well.